Hello, my fellow Christian fiction lovers. Welcome to the July wrap up. Hey, y'all. So, the month of July was actually not like a huge reading month for me. I only read 6 books, but 2 of those books were long classics, and another one was a long science fiction. So, only 6 books read, but like a lot of longer ones. I've decided I'm gonna go to doing monthly wrap ups. I was trying to do them like every season, and then it was just a lot of books, and then I was switched to like every 2 months. But the last one I did, I just by the end of it, I was so tired of talking about books, and obviously that is not the type of vibe I'm trying to give off. I always want to be like excited to talk about books and like having a fun time filming and recommending and all of that stuff. So, we're going to go back to monthly wrap ups. Even if it's only 6 books, that's just more time to talk about them and share all of the thoughts. Of the 6 books, all of them were 4 stars, which is crazy. One of them was like 4.25. It wasn't like a super standout or anything like that. So, honestly, which one was even 4.25? I don't even remember. They were all basically like 4 stars, kind of just a good book. I liked it a lot. I would recommend all of these books. Thankfully, nothing super bad. Okay, so I'm just going to go in the order that I read them, starting with Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So I wanted to read this book after I watched the movie. I typically would be a person that reads the book before watching the movie, but I didn't really have a preference. I didn't really care. But then I watched the movie and my friend had read the book and she was like, "You really should read it." So I put a hold on it in my library or at my library, and it finally came in. Yay. And I read it in the first week of July while I was on a vacation. It was such a good vacation book, honestly. I was just like any downtime we had, I was reading that book and I was loving it. It was so, so good. If you are unfamiliar with the plot, we are following Ryland Grace, and he wakes up on a spaceship in space, obviously. And he doesn't know why he's there. He doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing, and he is slowly getting his memories back of remembering, oh yeah, the world is ending. I was put on this spaceship to help save the world, and a bunch of science things that I'm not going to take the time to explain. And his 2 fellow astronauts, they were all put in comas while they were like going, because it took them like 4 years to get to where they were going. They were all put in comas, and the other 2 unfortunately passed away. And that's really hard for him, being alone. And then he ends up meeting an alien. Yes, a literal alien that is also there to save his home planet. So they work together, and it is such a great story. I loved it. It had such emotional depth to it. I loved it, and I'm gonna be honest. It is a secular fiction, and there are a couple of curse words. There's no like explicit content or anything like that. I mentioned this when I talked about it in a vlog. I saw so much opportunity for the gospel to be present in this book, and that I know it's a secular fiction, but it is just something that I'm like, oh man, if this had been taken from like a Christian worldview, it would have been so cool. And I would have loved to have seen that viewpoint. But alas, it is a secular fiction, still amazing, and I would still totally recommend. All right, and then next I read Head in the Clouds by Karen Witemeyer. This is the second Karen Witemeyer book I have read, and this one is highly recommended by a couple of other YouTubers, specifically Lucy, I forget her channel name, and then also I know um, Jeanette over at Jane Reads also really likes this book. So it came highly recommended by booktubers I really value their opinions. So I picked it up and read it. And this book follows Adelaide Proctor, who she thought she was going to marry this guy, and then she found out that he was already married. Whoops. Hate it when that happens. So she follows an ad for a governess position out in the country on a sheep ranch. And she starts taking care of this girl who is mute. She won't talk because of some really significant traumas that have happened in her life. She's like 5 years old. And then the other perspective is Gideon Westcott, and he is the sheep ranch owner. And he is also the basically like adoptive father of this young girl who has hired like he's the man who was like hired Adelaide to be the governess. I thought it was such a sweet setting and such a sweet way of like bringing the two characters together because they both care so much about what is the little girl's name? Isabella. They care so much about Isabella and they want what's best for her, and that just helps strengthen their bond. Talk about faith in this book. They love God, they rely on God and lean on him. Adelaide especially, just like the way she prays and prays over Isabella, and very intense drama because there's also an uncle, Isabella's uncle, who is like mad and doesn't want Gideon to like have a claim on her, even though Isabella's mother like basically gave him custody because she was dying. That's not a spoiler. That does come up in the first few chapters. But it's this whole drama of like, oh my gosh, is Isabella going to be kidnapped, and what are we going to do, and just it's a lot. It's very intense, and I was on the edge of my seat for parts of it. I loved it and I would definitely recommend. It was also very like not like a ton of characters to get confused by, which I appreciated because it's on the sheep ranch with only like a certain amount of people. Okay, and then the next book I read was Chasing Shadows by Lynn Austen. This was a reread for me because I did not remember what this book was about, and I wanted to make sure that I still liked it because I remember liking it the first time I read it. I just, I like to reread books if I don't remember exactly so that I can just re enjoy the story and all of that. So, Chasing Shadows follows three different women. The first woman is Lena, and she is a middle aged woman in the Netherlands. Yes, in the Netherlands. And after World War II starts, she and her husband decide to hide Jews on their farm. They live out on a farm, and that is how they do their part to resist the Nazis. And then we're also following Lena's young adult daughter, Ons. Yes, Ons. And Ons has moved to Leiden, which is like a bigger city, and she has basically become like a companion for this woman who has, like, for lack of a better word, like just frazzled nerves. She definitely has like a mental illness. It's just there's no diagnosis for it yet at this time, during the history. And so she is a companion for this woman, and then after the war starts, they like figure out what they can do to resist the Nazis and somehow, be a part of like a spy network or something like that. And then the other perspective we are following is Miriam, and she is a young woman around Ans's age as well. And she and her father escape Germany to flee the Nazis, and they go to the Netherlands thinking they'll be safe. Alas, they are not safe, and they have to go into hiding. And that is a very brief overview of the three different stories. I loved how this book followed three different plots that did like all the characters knew each other. Like Miriam and Ons were friends, and then obviously Ons and Lena were mother daughter. So all the characters knew each other, but they had distinct plots, and none of them felt rushed or like got confusing of like who's where, what's going on. They got the attention that was due for each of them, and I appreciate that it was not rushed. All right, and then I also reread Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, and I had so much fun rereading this book. I love Jane Austen so much, and I was glad to dive back into one of her books that I've only read Mansfield Park one other time, so now it's been two times, and it had been a couple years, so I really didn't remember the plot all that well. I had a general idea. I remember the first half of the book well, not the second half, like at all. So basically, Mansfield Park, we are following Fanny Price, and at the beginning of the book, her two, well, really, it's just her rich aunt and uncle decide that they will help her parents out, help Fanny's parents out, and take Fanny in because Fanny has like a million and one brothers and sisters, and her parents are just, there's a lot going on. And so they take Fanny in and raise her with their children. And it's such an interesting look at like how they make sure to distinguish that Fanny is not one of the Bertram siblings, but she's also not like riffraff, she's not a servant. And it's just so interesting because it's like certain people are very like, we have to make sure Fanny knows her place. And like Fanny never once questions her place. She's so docile. She's not gonna step on anyone's toes or like assert herself in a way that's not proper. But anyway, so it's just kind of about that. And then there are some like funny incidents that happen with the cousins, the Bertram cousins, and their friends, and it all happens when they're young adults. She goes to live there when she's 10, but then we like time jump to when she is like a young adult. And I did give this 4 stars because I am not a fan of who Fanny ends up with in the end. I don't like it, and I actually think that she should have ended up with someone different, especially after rereading this book. The first time I read it, I did give it 5 stars, but after reread, I'm like, no, it's a 4 star. It's not my favorite. I, I love it. Like, don't get me wrong, I love it. But it's not my favorite in terms of ending and all of that. Okay, and then after I read Mansfield Park, well, sort of while I was reading Mansfield Park, I took a break from it and I read The Odyssey by Homer. Specifically, I read the Alexander Pope translation, I believe. I listened to it on audio and also read it via ebook. And I did this in order to go and watch the new Christopher Nolan movie that came out. And wow, is all I can say to both of them. The book, the epic, was amazing. The movie, equally amazing. I appreciated both of them in their own ways. If I can somehow very briefly tell you what the Odyssey is about if you don't know already. So basically, we open on Odysseus's son, and Odysseus is the main character, and he has been gone from home for 20 years. So we open on his son Telemachus and his wife, Odysseus's wife Penelope, and they are overrun with suitors who want to claim Odysseus's throne, but there's not confirmation that Odysseus is dead. So basically, Telemachus has this kind of like coming of age moment where he decides to go out and search for his father. So that's kind of like the first part. And then we jump to Odysseus, and he, through a different series of events, ends up recounting the story of after the Trojan War, how he and his men just got, uh, went through trial after trial after trial and did not make it home yet at all at this point, and all of his men are dead, and he is finally trying to attempt to go home after being kept prisoner on the island of Calypso for many years. And so it's just the story of him attempting to return home, and he does return home in the end. And it's a lot, I will say. Like, it's genuinely confusing at times, and I think if I ever do reread it, which I would like to one day, I would read a different translation, even though the one I read I did enjoy and I did comprehend once I got into the story. I know there are some more modern language translations out there, and there's a lot of discourse and disagreement about that online, which I am not even going to put a pinky toe in at all. But I think for my own sake, since I did read a more like original translation, if I were to do it again, I would want to read a more modern one because it would be easier to understand at the end of the day. I rated the Odyssey 4 stars for all of the reasons that I just talked about. Do I recommend it? Yeah, I do. I think it is cool, but I also totally understand, like, if you're like, I don't ever want to read that, I'm like not gonna be over here like, you need to read it. I think it's, if the desire is there, go for it. It is attainable. I talked about all of this in my vlog where I read it, but if the desire is not there, there's no reason. There's no reason. Just watch the movie. You'll be fine. All right, and then the final book I read in the month of July was A Beautiful Disguise by Roseanna M. White. And this book was so lovely. I enjoyed it so much. We are following Marigold Fairfax, Lady Marigold Fairfax, excuse me. And she is part of a secret business called The Imposters, where she and her brother and 2 of their other friends are basically like PIs that get hired anonymously by different members of society. This is set in 1909, by the way. And they basically just spy on people and like uncover secrets and drama. And it's like definitely hard work, but it's also really cool. And the other character we're following is Sir Merritt Livingston, and he was in the Coldstream Guard, which is like the highest level of guard that you could be at the time. I'm assuming. And he basically got sidelined from that because of a rough bout with pneumonia, I believe. And he is in the intelligence division now at a desk job, and he starts to suspect that one of his coworkers does not have the purest of intentions. So he ends up hiring the imposters to do that work for him. And somehow, well, just through kind of like his friend is friends with Marigold's friends. So they all just kind of end up spending a lot of time with each other. And it presents this really interesting, like, Marigold knows that they're working for him and trying to uncover things about all of this, but also she's like becoming friends with him. And then obviously there is some feelings that get involved, but they don't get involved until like a lot later in the book than I was anticipating. But I highly, highly recommend this book. I loved it so much. It was so good, and I cannot wait to continue the series. And there's also like really good like faith aspects in this book too. So that is it. Those are all 6 of the books that I read in July. Be sure to let me know if you have read any of these and what your thoughts are on them. Definitely like a different mix for me. I only read 3 Christian fiction and then 2 classics and the 1 science fiction. Hoping to get a little more Christian fiction in this month of August. We shall see. But yeah, let's chat about all of it in the comments. Thank y'all so, so much for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you in a video very soon. Bye!